Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrina and this is Katrina Reads. This is part 3 of an ongoing series where I read bad reviews of my favorite books or series. Today's book is Outlander. It's the first of about, she writes lots of side stories, short stories. So there's 8 stories out, and I think there's also another series that she's done called, about one of the characters that showed up. There's 3 Lord John books. So it's a very, very large world. Besides, there's also now, and there's a bunch of novellas. She has a companion. Yeah, she has just gone on and on and on in the story with Lord John. I have the first set of, ooh, I'm gonna have to get this. Ooh, I Give You My Body, How I Write Sex Scenes by Diana Gabaldon. Although I don't necessarily have, like, I have book ideas that I come up with. I've never sat down and gotten the actual, what's the word I'm looking for, discipline to actually write anything. But I do dash down little ideas all the time. And so because of that, that little fantasy of being a writer, like I said, I don't do the November writing thing people do. I've written a paragraph here or there. I journal all the time. I used to journal prayers when I was a little girl, and I wrote stories as a little girl. It just hasn't gone into my adulthood. So I'm not at all pretending as if I'm any kind of real writer or anything, but I do write down. It's a little tiny side hobby. I will get an idea and write it down. And I do also love reading books about writing, especially from writers that I love. I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of how big this world is. Like I said, it has a TV show. Let me give you the synopsis, a short synopsis. Claire Randall marries Frank, and then they have to go straight to World War II. 5 years later, they come back together and actually have their honeymoon. On their honeymoon in Scotland, they go she's into botany, he's into genealogy and stuff. And I forgot what he was looking for, but she's like looking around for all kinds of different plants. And she comes along these standing stones, hears a strange sound, and is drawn back into the 18th century. I can never remember. I think it's the 18th century when it's the 1700s. So I can never remember. So she then she is found by this clan of, oh, what comes first? I think the British soldiers find her first, and then I think she gets away from them, and then I think the clan that Jamie is in, the Scottish clan of outlaws that Jamie is in, comes along and rescues her. But they're kind of suspicious of her because of her British accent, and they think she's part of the British soldiers, like she's some kind of spy or something, like, or she's a honey trap. Is that what they call the spies, the female spies? Because she is dressed in the way that they think is scandalous, because she only has like one dress on rather than all the bustles and all that kind of stuff that people would have back then. And through these different machinations, she becomes Jamie's wife, and there's all these different kerfuffles based on what she considers modern in a relationship versus the fact that she's basically being held at that point. She's trying to figure out a way to get back to the standing stones. She's guarded. She doesn't want her knowledge, her anachronistic knowledge, to out her as a witch. There's all these things, and all at the crux of all of that stuff going on, all of the trouble that they get into and all of the danger and all that stuff, Jamie and Claire fall in love. And it is the love for the centuries. And all of the hurt and pain and rape and torture and separations and time and war and losing babies and all of it doesn't take away from the epicness of their love. So that's the back. Oh, and it's peppered throughout with this wonderful, delicious sex. And Diana really does revel in describing the atmosphere and the surroundings and the food. And so she's one of those authors. I compare her a lot to George R. R. Martin. You're going to know the scent, the feeling of the food. You're going to be completely enraptured when you go into her story. So that's one thing that's going to make you enjoy the story or not, is do you like being told everything about where you are, what the house looks like, what it feels like, what everybody's wearing. That's the kind of immersion that you get with the Outlander stories, just like George R. R. Martin. So now let's read some of the 1-star and 2-star ratings here. I don't know if I'm ready. Okay, phone. DNF'd at page 470. This book really helped me forget a lot of craziness happening in my life the last few weeks, but it also got me into somewhat of a reading slump. I have felt obligated to finish this rather than pick something else up, often resulting in not reading anything at all. There was so much that could have been cut out of this book, as I am guessing is the theme of the series. It often follows the day-to-day meanderings of these characters, and nothing is really happening. It was often oddly sexual as well. I'm definitely a character-driven reader, but I do need there to be some overarching plot. And this, It was often oddly sexual as well. They were in love. Well, at first they weren't, but they became in love. Anyway, I am definitely a character-driven reader, but I do need there to be some more overarching block. I don't know why I keep saying block. Ugh. There was so much that could have been cut out of this book, as I am guessing is the theme of this series. It often follows the day-to-day meanderings of these characters, often with nothing really happening. It was often oddly sexual as well. I am definitely a character-driven reader, but I do need there to be... There was so much that could have been cut out of this book, as I am guessing is the theme of this series. It often follows the day-to-day meanderings of this character with nothing really happening. It was often oddly sexual as well. I'm definitely a character-driven reader, but I do need there to be some overarching plot, and this seemed more like a series of events that were only somewhat related. The time travel aspect was the only intriguing part of the book for me, and that took up about 2% of the plot. It probably didn't even take that much. It really is a very small part of the plot. It comes up a tiny bit much, like it's probably 2% of the whole series. It really does just get her there. And then there is one book where it's a little bit more, but out of the whole series, it really isn't. So if you're coming here for a time travel book, it really isn't that. Unless you're describing her thinking about how to heal someone when there's no penicillin and things like that. If that's what you're going to add into it, maybe 2% then. And then her trying to be careful about what comes out of her mouth, or people asking her, what did you just say? Because the word had not really been used that way yet, or invented or something like that. Unless you have a lot of time on your hands and really don't care how you spend it, I really wouldn't recommend this. I saw another 1 star. I gave up on this book because I was sustaining permanent damage from reading it, and I was afraid I'd start hitting back, and it's a borrowed copy, so that wouldn't be cool. In fairness, I should say there's a lot of good writing here. I really enjoyed the beginning chapters. They even kind of cracked me up because I have friends who love genealogy, and their husbands always get that look when they start talking about it, and that's exactly how I imagine Claire looking at her husband Frank when her husband Frank started droning on and on about his ancestors. All right, back to the review. She kind of goes into a little bit of calling Claire a Mary Sue, a little bit saying that, oh, it's just so lucky that she's a nurse and she can help everybody out. That's just the way that the author, I think if you would have made it so that she went back and had I would be annoyed, like, why are we reading this story if the character went back in time and was absolutely no use? Like, or, I mean, even if the person went back and wasn't a nurse, I think the normal person today knows more about bacteria and germs and things like that than people did. Maybe I don't know when they started learning about germ theory and things like that, but I would assume we'd know a little bit more about basic like CPR, things like that, because I know like we had to take CPR in high school. I had to take it again when I was in the Army. It was a suggested course again when I had a baby. I was in the military. All my kids were born when I were a military spouse, and so they had extra parenting classes that were free, and that was something that was offered. So even not having anything to do with the medical industry, I have knowledge, a basic knowledge of CPR and things like that. So, you know, I don't know. It would be weird if the author didn't construct her story so that Claire didn't have some advantage in going back in time. I don't know. I don't know how to refute that, or if that's just an opinion thing. That's just your opinion, man, from Big Lebowski. Anyway, so she goes on to say, still there was plenty to keep me interested, like leeches. The stuff about leeches was cool, and the info about healing herbs. And that kid getting his ear hammered into the board because he was caught stealing. Really, this book would have worked fine for me if it hadn't been for what everybody else seems to love about it, which is the romantic interest, which still would have been fine even with the whole she's married already thingy. But okay, let's say that she has to marry that guy. They aren't in love when they get married, so the whole point of the book is to watch their relationship develop while Claire struggles with guilt and fear and thoughts about how her real husband must be worried about her, and how the heck does time travel work in this book, and why is she just assuming that time is going by in the future at the same rate as it is for her? Why, I ask you? Sorry, I'm a minor league nerd, and this part really bugged me. So, just a moment. I wanted to say this is really well written. And I don't know what the ethics are necessarily of, do I give this person credit, or do I keep them like I think it would make a bigger deal if I were a big booktuber. I don't think it'll make a big deal now. But what if somebody saw this and they didn't want a bunch of attention brought onto their thing? I'm not sure what the ethics of giving credit to a reviewer with these. I should have watched. I do this a lot where I'll get an idea from like a list that someone has published on their blog or something, do the thing, and then forget to check the other videos done. So I don't know, but I really enjoy this review, the way she writes. I'm assuming she's a she. I don't know, Deborah. I don't know if she goes by she or they, but. So that's the first thing. I really enjoy reading Deborah's review. So if you you could probably find it if you just went to Goodreads and looked for Deborah's review. I guess I'll give that much credit. She has, I think, her last name. It seems like a real last name. So that's one thing. Secondly, I don't think we started thinking about time travel in that way. When do we have the first time travel book? I mean, it's on record, and what was it, 1800 something? And I've actually seen a couple video essays on YouTube about the first time travel books, and then they weren't necessarily as involved as we've got it now. And if you go to New Rockstar's channel, Eric Voss over there, I think it's his own kind of creation of like the 6 rankings of different types of time travel. And there's different little categories that may fall under it, but there's different kinds, like kinds where if you go back in time and time is frozen, you can't change it. Then there's stories and movies. They deal mostly with movies. So for them, it's movies where you'll go back in time, and it's the butterfly effect. You go back and you actually change things, so it's really dangerous if you go back in time. So they've identified 6 different kinds over there on that channel. So I don't think we were that evolved in our thoughts when it came to time travel yet in 1740. So there's that. So why would Claire, or 1940? Okay, so let's say, so think. Okay, so Claire was in the 1940s. So there was a time travel book out then. I have to think about what that first time travel book is. But who's to say that her thoughts would be that? We've sort of gotten a more congealed way of looking at things because of the internet now, right? So that's why some of us are losing our accents and things like that, because we all watch the same kind of media. We all kind of, because of the mass worldwide Western media push, right? So a lot of us, and it's kind of going back and forth, because a lot of us here who like we here in America watch a lot of British shows, read a lot of British books and stuff. So that whole Western, I don't even know what the word is that I'm trying to say, pushes a lot of culture out and formulaic types of language. I even hear black people from different parts of the diaspora with different accents speaking in the internet AAVE. They call it internet, but it's AAV. It's African American Vernacular English. And so there is a coalescence around a certain pop culture identity. And I don't think that one or two time travel books that may have come out by 1940 was pushing a coalescing around time travel ideas. That's my whole point. So I'll see if I can try to cut this down to get to that point. I don't think by 1940 pop culture had coalesced around 6 major different ways of how we think about time travel. So that's what I'm trying to say. So even thinking about Claire going back, she would probably just think, how am I going to get back to my husband? I kept thinking the whole time, like, you don't know if the standing stones are going to take you back to the same place. Who's to say you won't go to a different place? Who's to say you're going to go back to that same time? There's so much to question about it. And for her, she was just like, let me get back to these stones. And I'll figure it out from there. So, but she didn't stop herself and admitted she was being a big old nerd about it. So good for her. So what I just described would have been a book I could read and enjoy, or at least read and not scream in pain. But apparently someone gave Diana Gabaldon the creepiest piece of writing advice ever, and it was this. Listen, you know how if you're cooking and you worry it's not turning out well, just add bacon if it's savory and chocolate chips if it's sweet, and everybody will love it? Well, if you're working on your first novel and you don't know what to happen, and you don't know what to have happen next, just throw in some rape or attempted rape. Works like a charm. She follows this advice to the letter, and I'm sorry, but I have to go home now. I managed to read the she disobeys him so he beats her with his belt scene. I almost punched the book right in the face, but as I said, it's a friend's copy, so I had to be nice. Then I managed to get through the she forgives him for the beating like the next freaking day scene. I started fantasizing about this book getting stuck in the elevator of a burning building, but I was able to hold on and keep going. So then she talks about how Jamie and them get over that and they laugh about it. And then she says that the literary theme was rape, attempted rape, more attempted rape, marital rape, a little more rape, conversation about rape, giggling during conversation about rape. And I'm all like, I'm out of here. I don't care how many of my friends hate me. I read 444 pages in a row, plus I skimmed a lot of the rest of it to include the creepiest, rapiest Chekhov's gun I've ever seen. Do not tell me I didn't give this book a fair chance. I totally did. And in case you need proof, here's a list of all the things I learned about rape from Outlander. I will spare you all of that. If this book works for you, fine. I'm not here to judge. I'm just asking you to understand how completely creeped out I was by all of this. And not tell me I didn't give it a fair chance. I did. I really hate not finishing a book once I started, but I just couldn't stand it anymore. So, I don't know. I am much more, I guess, it's so interesting that I don't know why I've gotten more forgiving as this series has gone on, where I have talked about 3 books now, and I really had a lot more to say about the first one. There is a lot of rape in it, and so first of all, I don't know if I addressed one thing, and I'm mixing up, some time has gone by since I've started this, and I don't know if it was the second or this last reviewer who talked about how much Diana put into this book. Diana was a professor, I believe, of something before doing this, and she talked about how she learned how to writing Outlander. So it is very much, and then I think she just happens to be one of those type of writers where George R. R. Martin says that there are gardeners, and I forgot what the opposite is. I'm so sorry. I give half quotes constantly. What I'll do is I'll try to I think I give a lot of half quotes, but so his thing is there's gardeners and there are, I don't know what the other one is, but he and Diana Gabaldon are gardeners when it comes to the way they write. They don't come into it with a set outline and they stick to it and then the story is done. They come into it and then they let their characters do what they're going to do and they see where they're going to go and they write like that. And we see what the problem with that is. We see that these characters take on this loving life of their own, and these families grow and all this stuff. And we see how lush and beautiful and wide and big the worlds get, both in Outlander and in George R. R. Martin stories. But we also see that for some people, they can't handle all of that. It's, they don't want to sit there and hear pages and pages about all this different stuff. And it actually ends up, that kind of stuff lends itself to a cottage industry, like both Game of Thrones and, Song of Ice and Fire saga, and then the Outlander books, the world of Outlander. They have books about the fashion of the era. There's books about the food. I have recipe books and things like that. So, and then you have all these little novellas and side stories and dictionaries and all this other stuff that starts to come out of it. George R. R. Martin has a collaboration book that he did with two super fans who started like this online compendium of all things Game of Thrones, and they were so good that they became his like check person to check, oh, what year did I say this person was born in this book back then, and they knew it. So they then wrote a book together with him, and so this stuff becomes these big worlds because there's so much to glean from it. And so, but the downside of that is that for some people it is just too much meandering. And those kinds of books, if they're done well, if you fall in love with the characters, those of us who love those worlds can sometimes overlook some problematic things. The way that we have to consume media, I think a lot of times as women, people of color, that we just have to figure out where our levels of okay is with it. And we have to overlook some things or not. It depends on you, right? And we have to, and for me, this is melodrama, and I like melodrama. And what comes with melodrama, a lot of times when it comes to old-fashioned stories, is war and rape and all that kind of stuff, because women were a lot more, we still are, but even more so, as much as we are now. Think about how bad it was back then, when even like, I think not even in the 70s, even in the 80s, maybe even, I think even in the 80s, you had to have your husband sign on getting you a credit card. So what did you expect from Claire in this, going back to the 1700s? So a lot of stuff like that, like nitpicking time travel in a book that starts in the 40s and goes back to 1740, nitpicking women's issues when the majority of women didn't have any, even in good marriages, women didn't have a lot of say. So, and there's so much that's great that those things are overlooked, and some of it is tragic, and some of the other tragedy that comes is not rape. When you go throughout the rest of the story, some of the tragedy is tragedy that I've gone through, losing a baby, just being apart from someone. I remember crying when they had to be apart from each other when my husband was on deployment. And so I understand that some people are just, I understand that we are becoming more, we're getting our voices we're getting, and we feel powerful and a lot of that stuff. But I sometimes think, and I do understand that that's the reason why we do need to put content warnings and trigger warnings on things. And there is a level for all of us that we can deal with. And there's a time when we can deal with these things. So I'm all for giving content warnings and things, and I appreciate the difference of opinion when it comes to this one. Everybody has different reasons for not liking a book, and it's not personal. It's not personal. It's not a personal attack on me. So if you got to the end of this one, is there anything Scottish? Just put the Scottish flag. Just put the Scottish flag as our ending emoji here. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. I appreciate it. And thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you for all the likes. Thank you for all the subscribers. And be easy on yourself. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.